The slap didn't sting as much as the silence that followed. 300 faces turned toward me under the golden glow of chandeliers. Forks frozen midair. Music fading into nothing. I had only stepped on her gown. Just a corner of satin caught beneath my heel. But before I could even apologize, my sister-in-law spun around and struck me. The crack echoed louder than the violin playing seconds before. I stumbled back, heat rushing to my face, my husband's hand not reaching for me, but for her shoulder instead. He pulled her close, murmuring comfort, while I stood alone, the crowd's whispers crawling across my skin. My name is Ruth. Most people in my husband's family call me ordinary. It's not meant as an insult, at least not out loud, but it slips into their tone. Ordinary. Plain. The woman in the corner with quiet shoes and hair always tied back, who doesn't demand attention or sparkle the way they do at parties. That morning, before the wedding chaos, I woke early in our modest home. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the blinds, cutting soft golden lines across the kitchen counter. I set water to boil, measured coffee grounds with the same careful hand I used at work, and listened to the silence of a house where love had grown thin. My husband, Daniel, didn't join me. He rarely did. His mornings belonged to emails, to phone calls, to his family. I had grown used to the sound of his voice carrying through the walls, full of laughter when he spoke to his sister, Amelia, the bride of the day. I used to love that warmth. Now it only reminded me of the distance between us. I left early for work, as I always did. The world outside smelled of wet asphalt and blooming jasmine. At the office, I wasn't Ruth the ordinary wife. I was Ruth Holloway, the managing director of a firm whose name they never bothered to remember. My colleagues respected me, trusted my judgment, leaned on my ability to steady chaos. In that space, my voice mattered. "Morning, Ruth." My assistant, Claire, greeted me with her usual bright smile. She held out a folder. Numbers came in strong from the last quarter. Investors are pleased. Good, I replied softly, flipping through the pages. I never boasted. Results spoke for themselves. What most people didn't know, not my husband, not his family, was that the company I quietly built over 10 years now touched corners of the city they lived in. Restaurants they dined at, boutiques they adored, even the glossy magazine Amelia once bragged about being featured in. All, in some way, had ties back to me. But I never advertised it. Silence, I had learned, was power. Still, I carried a quiet ache with me wherever I went. Success at work filled me with purpose, but home felt hollow. I wanted Daniel to ask about my day, to see me, not just as his wife, not as an accessory at family gatherings, but as someone with a life of her own. The wedding loomed large on everyone's calendar. Weeks before, Amelia had called me. "Ruth," she said with her airy, practiced sweetness, "remember to keep your dress simple. Nothing too bold, okay? It's my day." I swallowed the sting, smiled though she couldn't see it. "Of course. It's your day." She laughed lightly, as though she hadn't just instructed me to stay invisible. And Daniel, he never defended me in these moments. He brushed it aside, said, "She's just stressed about the wedding." But stress doesn't explain cruelty. On the morning of the ceremony, I laid out a soft blue dress, elegant, modest, the kind of dress you blend into the background with. I fastened a pair of pearl earrings, the only jewelry I cared for, and stood before the mirror. Ordinary, perhaps, but steady. That was me. I didn't yet know that by nightfall, I would stand before the same crowd, no longer invisible. The truth is, Amelia never liked me. From the first dinner I shared with Daniel's family, I felt it. The thin smile. The way her eyes skimmed over me as though I were a placeholder until someone better came along. Amelia was the youngest, the adored one. Born into luxury with charm that filled every room. Daniel worshipped her, as did their parents. I was the outsider who didn't quite fit. It started with small things. I would bring a dessert to family gatherings, pies or cakes made from scratch, and Amelia would wrinkle her nose and whisper, "We usually cater from La Belle Pâtisserie, but thanks, Ruth." People laughed politely, placing tiny slivers on their plates. I smiled through it, though my chest burned. At birthdays and holidays, she gifted me perfume in bottles already half used, clothes a size too small, always wrapped carelessly. "Oh, I thought it might fit," she'd shrug. I said thank you anyway, teaching myself not to care. But Daniel, he saw none of it. She doesn't mean harm, he'd tell me in bed at night, scrolling through his phone. You're reading too much into things. You know how Amelia is playful. Playful? I wondered what word he would use if I ever slapped his sister in front of a crowd. Once, I overheard Amelia on the phone as I passed by the patio. She was laughing with a friend. Daniel married Ruth because she's safe. She'll never outshine him. She's practical. Her friend snorted. Boring, you mean? I froze, hidden by the wall, my nails digging crescents into my palm. Safe. Boring. Words meant to flatten me. I carried them quietly for weeks. And yet I endured. Not because I was weak, but because I wanted peace. Because I believed that kindness, eventually, would wear down cruelty. The wedding only sharpened the knife. 2 weeks before the ceremony, I joined Daniel and Amelia at a final planning meeting. Amelia sat at the long oak table, nails perfectly polished, her fiancé beside her, a quiet man named Victor, polite but watchful. Seating chart. Amelia announced, sliding papers across the table. She pointed to the family section. Daniel, you'll sit with me, Mom, Dad. Ruth, I've put you a little further back, table 9, near some of Victor's colleagues. I blinked. Table 9. Yes, she said, voice light, as though the insult were unintentional. It's just family photos will be easier if Daniel isn't constantly getting up. You understand. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. I nodded slowly. Of course. That night in our bedroom I asked him, why didn't you say anything? He sighed. It's her wedding. She can arrange it how she wants. Don't take it personally. But I did take it personally. How could I not? Still, I chose silence again. The night before the wedding, Amelia threw a rehearsal dinner in a hall shimmering with fairy lights. She wore a silk dress, moving from guest to guest, drinking in compliments like champagne. I lingered at the edges, making polite conversation with distant cousins, the taste of bitterness sharp in my mouth. At one point, Amelia approached me. She smiled sweetly, eyes glinting. Ruth, be careful tomorrow, all right? My dress is worth more than your car. Don't step on it. My chest tightened, but I said nothing. I only lowered my gaze, hiding the storm building behind my ribs. And then the wedding day. The church smelled of roses and candles. Guests rustled in silk and satin, the air buzzing with excitement. Chandeliers dripped gold light onto polished floors. I kept to the background, as always, until the moment Amelia entered. Her gown was breathtaking, I admit. Layers of satin and lace, a train stretching like a river of snow. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I shifted my feet to make room. My heel caught the edge of her gown. The fabric tugged lightly. Amelia spun around, eyes flashing. Are you serious? She hissed. I'm sorry, it was an accident. Before I could finish, her hand struck my cheek. A sharp crack. Gasps filled the air. The violinist stopped playing mid-note. Conversations died. All eyes on us. Heat flared in my face. Tears threatening but held back. My body trembled. Not just from the slap, but from the raw, naked humiliation of it. Daniel rushed forward. For one small second, I thought he might protect me, hold me up, tell Amelia she had gone too far. Instead, he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. It's all right, he murmured, stroking her arm. She didn't mean it. Let's keep going. Her. Not me. I stood there alone, cheeks burning, vision blurring under the weight of 300 stares. Whispers swirled like smoke. She deserved it, clumsy, ordinary Ruth. And in that moment, something inside me cracked. Not just from Amelia's hand, but from years of being unseen, unheard, unprotected. That was the night my silence ended. The sting on my cheek had already faded, but the sting in my chest spread wider with every passing second. Silence hung over the hall, heavy and suffocating. Crystal glasses caught the chandelier's light, frozen mid-toast. 300 eyes bore into me as though I were the spectacle of the evening. The mistake that disrupted perfection. I forced myself to stand still, shoulders squared, hands clasped before me to hide their trembling. My mother used to tell me, when humiliated, do not give them more. Give them stillness. Let them see their own cruelty reflected back. But my heart thudded so loudly. I feared the nearest guests could hear it. Amelia, with her perfect hair and flawless gown, turned back to the crowd with a theatrical sigh. She always ruins things, she said lightly, as though scolding a child. Laughter rippled through the front rows, uncertain but obedient. Daniel's hand still rested on her shoulder. He hadn't even looked at me. Not once. That cut deeper than the slap. I could have walked out right then. My legs twitched with the urge to flee the hall, to escape the murmurs and sideways glances, to hide somewhere dark and quiet. But something rooted me in place, a strange clarity. If I left now, they would have their story forever. Ruth the clumsy, Ruth the fool, Ruth the one who couldn't endure. So I stayed. The officiant, clearly rattled, cleared his throat and attempted to resume. Shall we proceed? His voice cracked slightly. But before Amelia could nod, Victor, the groom, lifted a hand. The room shifted. He had been quiet all evening, polite but subdued. Now his gaze swept across the hall with a steadiness that made people fall silent again. Even Amelia blinked, startled. Before we proceed, he said, his voice calm but cutting through the tension. There's something I need to say. A hush fell deeper still. Amelia tilted her head, confused. Victor, darling, what are you? He didn't look at her. His eyes were on me. Ruth, he said, speaking my name with a weight no one else in that hall had ever given it. Do you want to tell them who you are? Or shall I? My lips parted, but no sound came. I wasn't prepared. No part of me wanted to stand there, raw and exposed, with 300 pairs of eyes waiting for me to perform. Victor turned back to the crowd. His voice remained steady, measured, each word falling like a stone into water. You all think Ruth is what? Clumsy? Ordinary? Someone who doesn't belong in a hall like this. He let the silence stretch, daring anyone to answer. What you don't know is that half of you are here tonight because of her. Confusion rippled. Murmurs. Shuffling feet. Amelia laughed nervously. Victor, honestly, what? He cut her off. The venue? Ruth's company funded the restoration project that saved this place from closing. The magazine that featured your engagement photos? Ruth's firm owns a controlling stake. Even the hotel block your guests are staying in. Ruth made the deal possible. Gasps scattered through the hall like sparks. People twisted in their seats, whispering. Faces turned toward me, not with ridicule now, but with dawning recognition. My throat tightened. I wanted to speak, to confirm or deny, but my voice caught in the net of years spent silenced. Victor stepped closer, his expression firm. I kept quiet because Ruth asked me to. She doesn't flaunt her power. She doesn't need to. But after what I just saw, his jaw tightened as he glanced at Amelia. Enough is enough. For the first time that evening, Amelia's face faltered. The perfect bride, cracks showing in her porcelain mask. Her eyes darted to Daniel, desperate for him to intervene, to restore control. Daniel looked lost, his mouth opening, closing, as though words had finally failed him. And I, standing in the center of it all, cheeks still burning, felt a strange calm settle over me. I hadn't planned this unveiling. I hadn't wanted it. But now the truth hung in the air, undeniable, and for once, it wasn't me who had to prove my worth. It was them who had to reckon with it. The officiant shifted uncomfortably. Shall we continue with the vows? But the ceremony had already changed shape. No amount of vows could erase the fissure that had opened across the room. Amelia smiled tightly, trying to salvage her moment. Of course. Let's not waste any more time. But the crowd's eyes lingered on me. Not her. Me. That night, long after the chandeliers dimmed and the last guests staggered out with champagne still on their breath, I lay awake in bed. Daniel was beside me, already asleep, chest rising and falling with the heavy, careless rhythm of someone untouched by shame. My cheek still throbbed faintly where Amelia's hand had landed. I traced it with my fingertips, not because it hurt, but because I needed to remember. Every time I closed my eyes, the moment replayed. The sharp crack. The gasps. The crowd's eyes burning into me. Daniel's hand on his sister's shoulder instead of mine. And then, Victor's voice cutting through the noise. His steady defense. The way the room shifted. I should have felt vindicated. But lying in the dark, all I felt was hollow. Because the truth hadn't come from me. Someone else had handed it to the world while I stood frozen. The ceiling blurred above me as tears filled my eyes. Silent, stubborn tears that refused to fall. How long will you keep letting them define you? I sat up, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. The wooden floor was cool under my feet. In the quiet, I could hear the hum of the city outside, faint car horns, the whisper of tires on wet pavement. Life went on, indifferent to the storm inside me. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hands shook so badly I had to grip the glass with both palms. Images swirled. Amelia sneering at my homemade pies, her voice on the patio mocking me to her friends, the wedding seating chart that placed me in the shadows. Years of small cuts, tolerated in silence. And Daniel, my husband, who had never once stepped between me and her cruelty, who had chosen ease over truth, comfort over courage. The water in my glass trembled as I whispered into the dark, "No more." I thought back to the years I had spent building my company, the late nights when I typed until my fingers ached, the mornings when I showed up before anyone else. I had endured patronizing investors, arrogant men who doubted me, doors slammed in my face. I had fought harder than anyone knew. And I had won. Not by shouting. Not by demanding recognition. But by persistence, by quiet precision, by letting my work speak when my voice wasn't heard. And yet, in my own marriage, in my own family, I had let myself be invisible. I set the glass down with a firm click against the counter. Something inside me ignited then. Not anger, not rage, but a steady fire. A refusal. I couldn't control Amelia's cruelty. I couldn't control Daniel's cowardice. But I could control myself. I could decide once and for all to stop shrinking. At 3 a.m, I sat at my desk, pulling out documents, spreadsheets, letters I had tucked away. 10 years of quiet victories stacked neatly in black and white. I ran my fingers over the paper, each one a reminder. You are not ordinary. You never were. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine what life would look like without Daniel. Without his family's shadow pressing down on me. The thought was terrifying and liberating. When dawn came, the city bathed in soft gold. I hadn't slept a single hour. But I wasn't tired. My eyes were raw, my body trembling, but inside me was something new, a decision. I would no longer wait for others to name my worth. I would show it unmistakably, in a way no one could deny or diminish. And if that meant burning the fragile bridge between myself and Daniel's family, so be it. Sometimes the only way to survive is to stop asking to be seen and start standing where no one can ignore you. The morning after the wedding, I dressed for work in silence. Daniel was still asleep when I left, his phone buzzing with unread messages. Congratulations, gossip, questions. I didn't check if any mentioned me. I didn't care. At the office, Claire looked up the moment I walked in. "Ruth," she said softly, "I saw the video." My stomach tightened. Video. She nodded grimly. Someone recorded it. It's everywhere on social media. The slap. The whispers. But also, Victor defending you. For a moment, I felt sick. My private humiliation had become public spectacle. Yet as Claire handed me her phone, I realized something. The narrative wasn't what I feared. The comments weren't mocking me. They were questioning Amelia. Why humiliate her like that? Imagine slapping your own sister-in-law in front of guests. And her husband just stood there? The truth was already rippling outward, faster than Amelia could control. But I knew better than to rely on gossip to set me free. Truth left untended has a way of twisting into lies. If I wanted justice, I had to be precise. That day, after meetings and calls, I stayed late in the office. I pulled out folders I had once tucked away, records of projects my company had spearheaded, contracts signed with partners Amelia bragged about knowing, letters of thanks from organizations her friends adored. Piece by piece, I began building a quiet arsenal. Not to flaunt, but to show, if necessary, that I wasn't who they painted me to be. Still, doubt not at me. Late at night, back home, I stared at Daniel across the dinner table. He avoided my eyes, stirring his food without eating. Finally, I asked, "Do you have anything to say about last night?" He froze. Amelia was stressed. She didn't mean to. She slapped me, Daniel. My voice trembled, but I held it steady. In front of everyone. He looked away. You stepped on her dress. I laughed then, short, bitter, disbelieving. That's your defense? That I deserved it? Ruth, don't make this bigger than it was, he muttered. But it was bigger. Much bigger. And his refusal to see it only carved the gap between us deeper. For days, I carried on with my work. I met with investors, signed new contracts, planned expansions. Outwardly, nothing changed. But at night, when Daniel slipped into bed without touching me, I lay awake, rehearsing. Not words, not speeches, just the feeling of no longer bowing my head. Then came the setback. A week after the wedding, Amelia called me. Her voice was sharp, brittle. Ruth, listen. That video? It's making me look bad. People are saying awful things. I need you to post something. Say it was all a misunderstanding. I almost laughed. You want me to protect you? Yes, she snapped. Do you have any idea what this is doing to my reputation? People are questioning whether I'm fit for charity boards for Amelia. I cut in, my voice cool. For years you've mocked me. You've treated me like I don't belong. And when I was humiliated in front of hundreds, my husband, your brother, stood with you. And now you want me to save you. Her silence crackled on the line. Be careful, she hissed finally. You don't know who you're up against. But I did. I knew exactly who she was. A woman who had never been told no. That night, I sat again at my desk, my documents spread out like a battlefield. I realized then that my revenge didn't need shouting or spectacle. It needed patience, precision, truth. I began quietly moving pieces. First, I reached out to Victor. We met in a quiet cafe on a rainy afternoon. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes. I didn't mean to put you on the spot that night, he said gently. But I couldn't stay silent. I know, I replied. And I'm grateful. But Victor, if Amelia treats me this way, how does she treat you? His silence was answer enough. Over steaming cups of coffee, he confessed things I had long suspected. Her vanity, her temper, her reckless spending. The wedding slap, it turned out, was no outlier. It was who she was. Why marry her then? I asked softly. He sighed. Family pressure. Appearances. And maybe I thought I could change her. I shook my head. People don't change when the world keeps rewarding their cruelty. We talked for hours, and by the end, I knew I wasn't alone. Victor didn't want spectacle either, but he wanted truth. The second step was quieter still. I reached out to contacts, journalists, editors, people who trusted me. Not to spread lies, not to smear, but to place the facts carefully into the world. Articles appeared within weeks about the anonymous businesswoman behind the city's thriving projects, the unseen force shaping industries. They didn't name me at first, but the breadcrumbs were there. Those who knew knew. Amelia noticed. At a family dinner 2 months later, she sneered across the table. Interesting how the papers are suddenly full of stories about invisible women with too much money. Sounds familiar, doesn't it, Ruth? I only smiled. Maybe the world's finally ready to notice what's been in front of them all along. Her fork clattered against her plate. But the biggest test came with Daniel. One night he confronted me. What are you doing? All these stories, these whispers. Is this about the wedding? About Amelia? I met his eyes. This is about me. About who I am. Something you've never cared to see. He bristled. You're making us look bad. No, Daniel, I said softly, standing from the table. I'm making myself visible. If that embarrasses you, perhaps you should ask why. His silence told me everything. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of losing him. Because I had already found myself. It happened 3 months after the wedding, at a gala dinner hosted downtown. A charity event Amelia had fought desperately to co-chair. Determined to restore her image after the video. She had managed to secure the spotlight again, her name printed in gold on invitations, her smile beaming from glossy magazines. I had received an invitation too, not from Amelia, but from the board itself. Quietly, my company had been the largest donor that season. They wanted me seated at the front table. When I arrived, dressed in a simple black gown, the room stirred. Whispers ran like threads through silk. Some recognized me from the articles. Some still thought of me as the woman who had been slapped. Tonight, both versions would collide. I found my seat, table 1, directly across from Amelia and Daniel. Amelia's smile faltered when she saw me. She leaned into Daniel's ear, her knuckles whitening around her wine glass. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. The night unfolded with speeches, applause, the clinking of glasses. Amelia rose gracefully to give hers, her voice warm and performative. This year, she said, has been about resilience, community, and giving back. I am honored to stand here, supported by my family, by my husband, by my brother. She placed a hand on Daniel's arm. And by so many incredible partners. The crowd applauded politely. She basked in it, her eyes glistening with practiced emotion. And then, the host stepped up to the podium. Thank you, Amelia. Now, we'd like to acknowledge our leading benefactor. The individual whose contributions quietly built the foundation for tonight's success. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ruth Holloway. The room erupted in applause. Gasps, clapping, chairs scraping back as faces turned toward me. I stood slowly, smoothing my dress. My legs trembled, but my steps were steady as I approached the podium. Amelia's face froze in a mask of disbelief. Daniel's mouth fell open, his hands twitching against the tablecloth. I reached the microphone. For a moment, I only looked out at the crowd. Chandeliers shimmered above, glasses glinted below. And in the sea of faces, I saw them all. Investors, colleagues, strangers, and my husband, who had never once asked about my work. Good evening. I began, my voice calm even. Most of you don't know me. And that's fine. I've never been one for spotlights. But tonight, I think it's time to say something plainly. The room leaned in. Even the waiters stilled. For years, I've been called ordinary, invisible, safe. And perhaps I let those words stick longer than they should have. But the truth is, my work has touched many of you here, even if you didn't know my name. The businesses you invest in, the venues you celebrate in, the very programs we support tonight. My company has been there, quietly, consistently, building. A ripple of nods, soft murmurs of recognition. I continued, steady now. I don't need applause. But I won't allow myself to be diminished anymore. Not by strangers and not by family. Dignity is not optional. It is owed. I let the words hang, sharp as glass. Then I stepped back, leaving the silence to echo. Applause rose, hesitant at first, then swelling. Genuine. Sustained. At table 1, Amelia's smile had cracked completely. Her fingers clawed at her wine glass, her knuckles pale. Daniel sat rigid, his eyes darting between me and the crowd, as though the ground beneath him had shifted. When I returned to my seat, people reached out, touching my hand, whispering congratulations. Amelia sat frozen, forced to clap weakly, her cheeks flushed with something that wasn't grace. For the first time in years, I felt taller. Not because I had shouted, not because I had fought, but because I had stood, simply, in the light of truth. And they couldn't look away. Sometimes I still think about that night. The chandeliers, the whispers, the sting of her hand on my face. For a long time, I thought it would define me. That moment of humiliation burned into the memory of 300 people. But here's the truth. Humiliation only lasts as long as you let others write your story. The moment you pick up the pen yourself, everything changes. I used to believe power came from being loved, from being chosen, from being someone's wife, someone's sister-in-law, someone's guest at the table. But now I know, real power comes from standing tall even when no one offers you a chair. Daniel and I live separate lives now. The papers are still unsigned, but the decision was made in silence long ago. He still looks at me sometimes with regret, sometimes with longing. But neither moves me anymore. I no longer need him to see me, because I see myself. As for Amelia, her shadow lingers at family gatherings. Polite smiles, strained conversations, an undercurrent of something unresolved. She has not apologized and maybe she never will. That's fine. Her apology is not my freedom. My freedom came the moment I realized I didn't need to erase what happened. I needed to own it. That slap that night was the spark that burned away years of silence. Without it, perhaps I would still be sitting quietly at the edge of every room, hoping someone might turn toward me. Now I don't wait to be invited. I walk in. Sometimes people ask me if I regret it. The way I revealed everything, the way I shifted the ground beneath my family's feet. I tell them the truth. Regret is a luxury for those who had choices. I had none. Staying silent would have been another form of dying. Speaking up was survival. And survival, I've learned, is not shameful. It is sacred. So when I look back at that night, I don't see a victim anymore. I see a beginning. Because in the end, it wasn't about the slap, or the whispers, or even the applause that followed my speech. It was about finally learning to choose myself. And once you do that, no one can unchoose you again.